you have this narrative that's built up and supported, and it persists long after the actual data are out there, and it's very difficult to break because they use these mechanisms to reinforce it. But you got to go back to the emerging science. And what happens is when you have a time when this science is not a thing, right? That's scientism. When you have change going on in the research data, often corporate media is way behind the curve, typically years. So that's why we do what we do with our Substack.
That makes a lot of sense as to why the corporate press is behind the curve, because they're well behind the research. It would be silly to think that some journalist in an office who's never been in a lab has the bleeding edge understanding of all this technology. What I will say is, are you familiar with BMJ.com?
Yeah, British Medical Journal.
Yeah.
And is this a prominent medical journal for publishing?
BMJ is a really quite a good journal.
Yeah.
They're not flawless like any medical journal.
But I just want to make sure I'm not pulling up some
they're
by night random conspiracy blog.
They are one of the few that has come through the COVID crisis with integrity.
So I wanted to I want to make sure that people who are listening understand BMJ is not some random conspiracy site, because they actually do have a peer-reviewed publication, Prenatal and Infant Exposure to Ambient Pesticides and Autism Spectrum Disorder in Children, population-based case control study, with the conclusion, findings suggest that an offspring's risk of autism spectrum disorder increases following prenatal exposure to ambient pesticides within 2,000 meters, I'm assuming, of the mother's residence during pregnancy, compared with offspring of women from the same agricultural region without such exposure. Infant exposure could further increase risk for autism spectrum disorder with comorbid intellectual disability. They do include a correction citing that there was an oversight and a potential conflict of interest. I want to make sure everybody understands that. But this is what BMJ has as a published, peer-reviewed journal on the issue. And so I just find interesting, when you pull up glyphosate on Wikipedia, you want to talk about how the media operates, happens to be one of my biggest critiques of my biggest focuses, one of my focuses, misinformation campaigns in the glyphosate Wikipedia, where it cites an opinion piece. I was surprised to see that it linked to science-based medicine, and it was an opinion piece. I figured I'd click on it and it would give me a peer-reviewed journal, claiming that it's misinformation to make that connection. Meanwhile, an actual peer-reviewed journal on BMJ.com states that they did find that there was an increased risk with autism spectrum disorder based on ambient pesticides. Why is Wikipedia allowing its editors to place an opinion, an op-ed, not a scientific journal, as a citation to call it misinformation? Meanwhile, BMJ actually has a study which says, you actually found this. Now, I have no problem saying if it's contentious and there's conflicting scientific studies, then it requires more data. I have no problem saying that. I have no problem saying some have found that it may actually do this. Others have contested it. I think that's a fair thing to do. Why would Wikipedia put an op-ed as a scientific citation? Well, that seems absurd.
So, Tim, one of the things about Wikipedia, I've had to dig into this because, of course, I'm slandered and defamed on Wikipedia in every which way, and they still claim that. Yes, I'm sure.
Mine's locked. No one can change it. Like, they locked in all the negative stuff on me, and you can't do anything about it.
Wikipedia has some quirks, just like a lot of the AIs do. A lot of the AIs and Wikipedia don't actually cite peer-reviewed literature. They have a list of sources that you're allowed to use in building your edits to the Wikipedia page. And most of those are aligned with the Trusted News Initiative. They're basically the big news outlets. And so they don't go into peer-reviewed literature. That's actually disallowed both by many of the AIs for training purposes as well as for Wikipedia. And so you find the situation like, just not to make it about myself, but I had all of these attacks that are recited again and again and again on Wikipedia, but no references to my actual 100-plus peer-reviewed papers. That's not allowed. It's a very strange ecosystem, information ecosystem associated with Wikipedia that's really biased towards supporting and enforcing corporate media.
I'd like to just pull up one other, because I actually have many different studies. This is, I hope everybody's, look, Let me just give you the quick overview one more time before I show all of these different studies, which maybe they're wrong. I have no idea. I'm not a scientist, right? At the very least, if there is a debate over the issue, and there are claims by people in science-based mag or whatever that website is, claiming it's misinformation, it should be, here is a scientific study that found no correlation or inconclusive data, and here's a study that challenges, here's a study that supports. The issue is widely debated, with some saying yes, some saying no. I'm fine with that, if that was the case. But when they lead with, it's misinformation because this guy called the woman stupid and said so, and then I just Googled it, and I have a list of various peer-reviewed studies showing a link between either glyphosate, autism spectrum disorders, autism-related disorders, or pesticide in general. This one from, and I think this is the stupidest name for a journal, but they went with it, PNAS. So
it's the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences.
I want to just jump in because you're pointing out the exact problem, the world we live in.
Real
right?
quick, just so I can show this real quick. This is maternal glyphosate exposure causes autism-like behaviors in offspring through increased expression of soluble epoxide hydrolase, and this is PNAS. They're going to mention that there's a correction for this article that I should check out, and there's always something in it where they say correction, yada, 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 by these individuals. First published, author's note, the author's name should appear as Debin, not Debin Wan, not Wang. They apologize for the error. But when they put out this thing and saying there's a correction on it, that's often used to say, hey, this is not legit. Yeah. There's a SCRP. You're familiar with SCRP? Is that another?
I don't know what the acronym is. I don't know.
Scientific Research Academic, SCIRP.
So that is not if you want to dig into this, this is actually Journal of Behavioral and Brain Science.
Ah, I see.
Okay.
It's listed up there. This is an aggregator.
I mean, if you want to look, you should just look at the, research that got presented in the courts, because, Bayer Monsanto had to settle billions in lawsuits, right, for non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and that's what
NHL, yes.
Yeah.
So this is the links to obesity and autism is new science that's coming.
Yeah, and it's because there's too many confounding variables. It's hard to prove. But a court of law. That's what Bobby was arguing.
I will just say settlement does not mean fact.
No.
A company that settles usually settles because litigation is more expensive, and that's probably the majority of lawsuits.
But typically, in order to have a precedent, there's there's a lot of science in order to even have that precedent. That's what kind of Bob.
I disagree with the lawsuit thing. I don't think it's a good example.
Yeah, but I think you have to get to this point. Is what we're all trying to say is there a signal or is there not a signal? Does this deserve more research? And we're living in a time where they keep telling us the science is settled. There are laws right now that they're trying to pass all across this country to give the same liability protection to glyphosate that's sprayed on all of our crops, so you will never be able to sue. You'll never be able to go into courtroom again, just like we have with vaccines. So why would you need liability protection if the product is perfectly safe? We know we have issues. These are real signals. And to your point, Wikipedia, our media, mainstream is absolutely screaming misinformation. They did it all throughout COVID. We have a congressional investigation, a 500-page document that comes out and says social distancing, 6 feet, was made up, had no science behind it, even though Tony Fauci stood in front of cameras and said to us, if you question me, you're questioning the science. Now he admits in front of the Congress there was no science in the 6-foot distance rule. There is no science that masks actually stop transmission. All of these, the vaccine couldn't stop transmission, even though they said it was 95% effective. Yet still, every one of those news organizations talk about those of us that called that out from the very beginning, that we're still the ones spreading misinformation, when our government clearly caught, Rand Paul has pointed this out, clearly was the one distributing misinformation. They continue, Wikipedia is a misinformation vessel, and most of mainstream is. But can we just talk really quickly, because the science around this glyphosate in the gut and autism, first of all, I'd be the first to say we don't have enough science on any of this. It is so hard to get decent investigations because you're being blocked by the industry itself, which has been controlling your regulatory agencies, which is the light at the end of the tunnel with Robert Kennedy Jr. You finally have someone that doesn't work for any of these industries going in and saying, we're going to do real peer-reviewed science and put it all on the table. But what's very fascinating about glyphosate, whether it does or does not, autism, the heart of this, the whole MMR conversation with Andrew Wakefield, who's the big baddie, the first doctor to ever connect MMR and the potential of autism. But it was an intestinal study. The guy he was a gastroenterologist back in the late 1990s, who all these parents said, my child has what looks like Crohn's disease, but they got it right after they had autism, and I'm wondering if there's a connection. That's what his study started with. It got sidetracked into being about a vaccine, but the question was this a neurological disorder or was it a gut disorder? And what he started looking into is it appears to be directly connected with the gut. Now they're doing studies where they do fecal transplant. They take a healthy child's feces and put it in the intestine of an autistic child, and that child does better. They've been doing it in rats. It's amazing. And they can do the opposite. They can take autistic rats, take their feces, and put it into a healthy rat and make it start having autism qualities. So we're in a whole new space now where your gut health appears to be affecting our neurological health, right?
Do you watch South Park?
Very rarely.
Very rarely, but they did that episode where everyone was trying to steal Tom Brady's feces because the health effects of the transplant.
Yeah.
You mentioned early on the free market was likely the problem. With everything we're talking about in media, there was that viral video of this news program is brought to you by Pfizer, over and over and over again. And I don't know that it's necessarily a free market when you have monopolistic forces. And I turn on Fox News every day. And I got to tell you, my absolute favorite commercial is, have you seen the Fanapt Iperidone or whatever it's called? It's like this anime woman opening her shop and smiling, and she sees an elderly couple laughing. The whole time it's telling you about this medication that can kill you, cause stroke, prolongs the QT interval, which is associated with heart arrhythmia or sudden death, and how it's like, it lists all these insane side effects where it's like, that sounds scarier than whatever it is the person's, it's bipolar 1 disorder or whatever. But we have these commercials, to me, they're absolutely insane. And they're funding all of our news programs, even Fox News.
Right.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Culture War podcast. We're live every Friday, 10 a.m. to noon. So subscribe and come hang out.